An elderly fan mailed Steve Harvey homemade cookies. His surprise visit shocked the entire nursing home and proved that sometimes the most meaningful connections are formed through simple acts of kindness across generations, and that when we take time to honor the people who bring sweetness into our lives, we create moments of joy that transform entire communities. It was a typical Thursday morning in September 2024, and Steve Harvey was in his office reviewing his daily mail when his assistant, Maria Santos, brought him a package that would lead to one of the most heartwarming experiences of his career. "Steve, you received something unusual today," Maria said as she placed a small, carefully wrapped box on his desk. "It's from a nursing home in Savannah, Georgia, and it feels homemade." Steve examined the package, which was wrapped in brown paper and tied with a cheerful yellow ribbon. The return address indicated it was from Magnolia Manor Nursing Home, and the careful, old-fashioned handwriting suggested it had been sent by an elderly person. "Did they include a letter explaining what it is?" Steve asked as he carefully unwrapped the package. "There's a handwritten note attached," Maria replied, handing Steve a piece of floral stationery covered in the same careful penmanship. Steve opened the note and found a message that immediately touched his heart. "Dear Mr. Harvey, my name is Eleanor Thompson, and I am 87 years old. I have been watching your shows for many years, and your humor and wisdom have brought me so much joy during some difficult times. I used to be famous in my family for my chocolate chip cookies, but since I moved to the nursing home, I don't have many opportunities to bake for people I care about. I asked the activities director if I could use the kitchen to make a batch of cookies for you as a way of saying thank you for all the happiness you've brought into my life. I hope you enjoy them. With love and admiration, Eleanor Thompson." Steve felt his heart warm as he read Eleanor's thoughtful message. The simple generosity and effort behind her gesture, an 87-year-old woman asking permission to use a nursing home kitchen to bake for someone she had never met, represented the kind of pure kindness that reminded him why his work mattered. Steve opened the box and found a dozen perfectly shaped chocolate chip cookies, wrapped in cellophane and arranged with obvious care. Each cookie looked homemade and delicious, clearly the product of decades of baking experience and considerable effort, despite Eleanor's age and circumstances. "Maria, these cookies represent more than just a snack," Steve said as he examined Eleanor's handiwork. "This is an 87-year-old woman who took time, effort, and probably some of her limited resources to do something kind for someone she's never met." Steve tasted one of Eleanor's cookies and was immediately impressed by the quality. The cookies were perfectly balanced, crispy on the edges, chewy in the center, with just the right amount of chocolate chips and a hint of vanilla that suggested years of perfecting the recipe. "These are incredible," Steve said after taking his first bite. "Eleanor clearly knows how to bake, and she put real love into making these." As Steve enjoyed Eleanor's cookies, he began thinking about the woman who had made them and the life circumstances that had led her to reach out to him in this particular way. Eleanor Thompson was living in a nursing home, which suggested she either had health issues that prevented independent living or lacked family support to remain in her own home. Despite these challenges, she had maintained enough spirit and generosity to want to express appreciation to someone whose work had brought her happiness. Steve realized that Eleanor's gesture represented not just kindness, but also a form of connection across the isolation that many elderly people experience in institutional care settings. Her cookies were a way of maintaining her identity as someone who cares for others and contributes to relationships, even within the limitations of nursing home life. "Maria, I want to do something special for Eleanor," Steve said after finishing his second cookie. "This woman took time and effort to bring sweetness into my life, and I want to return that kindness in a meaningful way." "What did you have in mind?" Maria asked. "I want to visit Eleanor at Magnolia Manor and surprise her with a thank you that she'll never forget." But I also want to do something for the entire nursing home community, because I suspect Eleanor isn't the only resident there who would benefit from some extra attention and appreciation. Steve began planning what would become one of his most memorable community outreach efforts. He contacted Magnolia Manor Nursing Home in Savannah and arranged a surprise visit that would not only thank Eleanor for her thoughtfulness, but also bring joy and recognition to the entire facility. Steve decided to organize a complete entertainment and appreciation event for the nursing home residents. He arranged for a catered lunch featuring foods that many elderly residents would remember from their younger years, hired a live band that specialized in music from the 1940s and 1950s, and planned to spend the entire afternoon interacting with residents and hearing their stories. Most importantly, Steve arranged for the event to be professionally filmed so that the residents' families and the broader community could see the celebration and be inspired to show more appreciation for elderly people in their own lives. 3 days after receiving Eleanor's cookies, Steve made the drive to Savannah with his production team and surprise planning crew. Magnolia Manor's activities director, Linda Morrison, had helped coordinate the logistics while keeping the visit completely secret from the residents, especially Eleanor. On Saturday afternoon, Steve walked into the main recreation room of Magnolia Manor Nursing Home, where 45 residents were gathered for what they believed was a routine weekend activity session. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Residents who had been sitting quietly suddenly became animated and excited as they recognized the famous television host walking into their daily environment. "Is that really Steve Harvey?" asked Margaret Williams, an 82-year-old resident who was sitting in her wheelchair near the front of the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve said with his characteristic warm smile, "I'm here today because one of your fellow residents, Eleanor Thompson, sent me the most delicious homemade cookies I've ever tasted, along with a letter that touched my heart." Steve looked around the room until he spotted Eleanor, a petite woman with silver hair and bright eyes, who was staring at him in complete disbelief. "Eleanor Thompson, would you please come up here so I can thank you properly for your incredible kindness?" Eleanor, with the assistance of a walker, slowly made her way to the front of the room, while the other residents applauded enthusiastically. Her face was glowing with surprise and happiness as she approached Steve. "Eleanor, your cookies were absolutely delicious, but more importantly, your letter reminded me why I do the work I do," Steve said as he gently hugged the elderly woman. "You took time and effort to bring sweetness into my life, and today I want to return that kindness to you and everyone here." Steve spent the next 10 minutes learning about Eleanor's life and sharing her story with the other residents. Eleanor had been a teacher for 40 years, a mother of 3 children, and a grandmother of 8. She had moved to Magnolia Manor 3 years earlier, after her husband's death and the fall that had made independent living unsafe. "Eleanor taught 3rd grade for 4 decades, Steve announced to the room. "She helped shape the minds of thousands of children, and she's still spreading kindness and joy at 87 years old." But Steve's tribute to Eleanor was just the beginning of the afternoon's surprises. He announced that he had arranged a complete celebration in honor of all the residents, featuring their favorite foods, music, and entertainment. The catered lunch included classics like fried chicken, meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread, and homemade desserts that reminded many residents of family meals from their younger years. A live band performed songs from the era when most residents were young adults. Big band music, early rock and roll, and romantic ballads that prompted many residents to sing along and share memories of dancing, dating, and celebrating during their youth. Steve spent hours moving from resident to resident, hearing their life stories, learning about their careers, families, and experiences, and showing genuine interest in their perspectives and wisdom. He met Robert Johnson, a 91-year-old World War II veteran who had served in the Pacific Theater and still maintained detailed memories of his military service. Steve listened intently, as Robert shared stories about his experiences and his pride in serving his country. He talked with Martha Davis, an 85-year-old former nurse who had worked in hospitals for 45 years and had countless stories about caring for patients and supporting families during medical crises. Steve was introduced to James Wilson, an 89-year-old retired mechanic who had owned his own auto repair shop for 50 years and still enjoyed discussing cars and mechanical innovations with anyone who would listen. Each resident had fascinating stories, decades of experience, and wisdom that came from living through historical events, raising families, building careers, and navigating the challenges and joys of long lives. "Ladies and gentlemen," Steve announced during the afternoon celebration, "I came here today to thank Eleanor for her cookies, but I'm leaving with something much more valuable. Your stories, your wisdom, and your reminder that every person has lived an incredible life worth celebrating." Steve arranged for professional photographers to take individual portraits of each resident that could be shared with their families, and he made sure that everyone received personalized attention and recognition during the event. But the impact of Steve's visit extended far beyond that single afternoon. The nursing home staff reported that residents talked about the celebration for weeks afterward, and many showed increased engagement in activities and social interactions following the recognition and excitement of the surprise visit. Eleanor Thompson became a local celebrity, with her story and her cookie recipe featured in the Savannah newspaper and on local television stations. She received hundreds of letters from people who had been inspired by her simple act of kindness and Steve's generous response. Steve established a partnership between his foundation and Magnolia Manor that provided ongoing funding for enhanced activities, entertainment, and quality-of-life improvements for residents. The partnership became a model for nursing home support programs that other communities replicated. 6 months after his surprise visit, Steve invited Eleanor to appear on his television show, where she demonstrated her famous cookie recipe and shared her perspective on aging, kindness, and finding joy in unexpected places. "Eleanor, when you sent me those cookies, were you expecting anything in return?" Steve asked during the television interview. "Oh my goodness, no," Eleanor replied with a laugh. "I just wanted to say thank you for all the happiness you've brought into my life over the years. I never imagined that you would actually visit our nursing home and create such a wonderful celebration for everyone." "Eleanor, you taught me something important about the power of simple kindness," Steve responded. "Your cookies were delicious, but your letter reminded me that the smallest gestures can create the biggest impacts when they come from genuine appreciation and love." Eleanor's television appearance inspired thousands of viewers to reach out to elderly people in their own communities, visit nursing homes, and show appreciation for the older adults who often feel forgotten or overlooked by busy society. The Eleanor's Cookie Challenge became a viral social media movement, encouraging people to bake cookies for elderly neighbors, nursing home residents, or other seniors who might benefit from acts of kindness and recognition. Steve frequently shares Eleanor's story during speaking engagements and community events, using her example to illustrate the importance of recognizing and honoring elderly people who continue to contribute love and wisdom to the world despite physical limitations or institutional living circumstances. Today, at 88 years old, Eleanor Thompson continues living at Magnolia Manor, where she has become the unofficial ambassador for residents and regularly welcomes visitors who come to meet the woman whose cookies led to one of the most heartwarming surprise visits in nursing home history. Steve keeps Eleanor's original letter and cookie recipe in his office as a reminder that the most meaningful fan mail often comes not from celebrities or important people, but from ordinary individuals whose simple expressions of appreciation can inspire extraordinary responses. Eleanor's cookies taught me that kindness doesn't require wealth, fame, or special abilities. Steve often reflects when discussing the experience. It requires only thoughtfulness, effort, and the willingness to reach out to someone whose work has brought joy into your life. The story of Eleanor's cookies and Steve's surprise nursing home visit proves that when we take time to respond meaningfully to simple acts of kindness, we create ripple effects that bring joy not just to individuals, but to entire communities of people who deserve recognition for their life experiences, wisdom, and continued capacity to give and receive love. If this heartwarming story of intergenerational kindness, the power of simple gestures, and the importance of honoring elderly people in our communities moved you, please subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who needs to see that the smallest acts of appreciation can create the biggest moments of joy. Have you ever received or given a simple gift that created an unexpected connection, or witnessed how recognition can transform the lives of elderly people? Let us know in the comments about ways we can better appreciate and support the older adults in our communities. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more amazing stories about the beautiful things that happen when we choose to respond generously to the kindness that others show us.